Yeah, it's funny. I've also been kind of working my way through some of these exercises. Again, I want to go back and actually do everything in order and really, actually using this book as a workbook and not like reading it and then going off vibes, because that's not what he wrote it for. And it's funny seeing Niffler, the training that I'm doing with him seems to be working really well. Like I don't have video of it. But I went out and did some alert work with them today, and Niffler has really kind of got it as far as like this really nice, precise alert that, he's got described before you start adding the target odor. And Barley, I'm not quite sure. I'm really excited to like work through it as a workbook with Barley, because I would have expected it to go the other way around just because. But I think the reason I thought it was going to go better is actually the reason it's going worse. I've done so much more training with Barley, so I would have expected him to pick up on it more. But Barley is also that very classic, like the dog you learned to shape with. So like,
that's my Sophie too. Yeah.
Is hard. He's like nose poking and then backing up. And if I try to wait for duration, he just starts offering other behaviors. And if I cue it, he'll do it again, but he's still not doing any duration. It's actually really nice. You guys have been hearing me for like a year now, kind of like hemming and hawing over Niffler and, being angsty about him. And it's really nice to have something that I'm working on that is like really relevant to our job, and Niffler's blowing on something. It's really nice.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Sophie's the same way. Like, she's such a worker for me. Like, I think Barley probably is for you. But she had that shaping background and the agility and like pain and conditioning background when I started her scent work. And then we started on containers. And then anytime I try to get duration, she was like, "Oh, that's not it. Like, how about pause?
Yeah, you must want
do you want down? Do you want me to put my paws on it?" I'm like, breathe for a second.
Yeah. It's amazing watching how quickly like my own frustration grows with Barley doing something like this. Just like, just stop. Just do the thing. Do it a little longer. Like, just stop.
You were there.
Yeah, you've got it. You're doing it right. Just stop moving. It's so funny watching. Yeah, Niffler is just like, oh, I understand. So anyway, it'll be fun I was actually thinking that maybe what we should do, partially because I've forgotten to figure out what books are on the list for our next book. That's something we should talk about, see if there are any suggestions. But I was also thinking that maybe for next month, while we're waiting for all the books to come in the mail, we should all actually just go through this supposed 15-day protocol and actually go through the book. And and that's exactly how he says that the book's intended to be used. It's you read it through and then you go through and do all the training.
I would love that. Because I am trying to go through it, but going through it with others and, just having that accountability a little bit, and someone else to kind of look at, if I video the sessions, what I'm doing with it, I think that would be great. I don't know what others would do, or would think, but I would love it. Especially because I want to go back and follow the steps a little bit more with alert, and then just everything.
Yeah. Well, and actually I just signed up for the Fenzi Dog Sports Academy camp that happens in early October. And I'm taking all of Sarah Owings's nosework seminars. And I messaged her to ask, about Niffler's target odor, because he's not on any nosework odors. And she was like, yeah, we probably could, but it would be kind of, it's a little challenging if we have to put yours out, and like, hypothetically, the nosework dogs should be fine working past Niffler's target odor, but it'll also behave really differently. So anyway, long story short, I'm going to just be putting Niffler on. I'm going to try the cocktail method because that's what Sarah Owings is suggesting, just doing a cocktail of birch, anise, clove. before I go to this seminar. And it'll make my life a lot easier to have him on all of those target odors, just like, again, for like the seminar circuit. So
why did she suggest a cocktail method?
I think basically because I've never done the cocktail method before, but she suggested it, I think basically because because it's coming up pretty quickly, so that I don't spend time doing three different odors.
Oh, okay.
Kayla, let me make a little comment because I started Greta with the cocktail method on essential oils, but you also mentioned that you have the same thing with Niffler that Greta likes to do, is just run and catch an edge of an odor and run really fast till he catches something. If you do essential oils with him, you are going to make that problem worse.
Yeah, so what I'm planning on doing with the essential oils is intentionally working in really small spaces where there's odor everywhere, and then so it's all gonna be sourcing problems at first. And then we're also still doing a lot of really intense, like nose down, deep sniffing work. I've actually got video I need to put in the Facebook group today because I had a really interesting little experience with one of our target odors where he's passing within like 3 inches of it and not getting any target odor. So I've actually decided to put that one away for now.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
I'm really happy with how he's searching right now, and I don't want to break it. And I am cognizant of that with the nosework odors, but I think we're at a point where I think I can start swinging that pendulum again. And like, if I'm cognizant about how I'm setting those hides and the areas that I'm working him in. Because I definitely don't want to put out those hides in like a big windy open area where he can just play that game of like hitting a target odor from 100 meters away and following a straight scent cone.
Okay, well, you better, what I would say is test after he probably will love essential oils because they're easier, and make sure right away that you take him back to the harder stuff and make sure that he's still going to search in a way that he can find those odors too.
Yeah, well, Alex, it's going to be really hard in a small area. The essential oil is going to fill up the whole room, so it's not actually going to be really easy for him.
Yeah, it'll be a different challenge.
Yeah,
different sort. And I think it's gonna be interesting for him. But yeah, I'm planning on probably doing both every day. And I don't have to put a ton in those essential oil bank accounts once he's done that initial imprint.
He doesn't need to love it. He doesn't need to have this huge reward history with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, we just have to get him imprinted so that he can get through the seminar, and then like we'll pull him out again whenever we've got other seminars coming up.
Right.
Or I mean, I'm kind of looking at all of my target odors that I've got right now, and I'm kind of like, ooh, these are all really old and really dry, which is perfect for what we're working on right now. But I think it'll be nice to have him on some of these target odors, just so that like, if and when I run out of my current samples, because I'm kind of slowly getting rid of my samples right now as they get too degraded, it'll be nice to have some replenishable. So anyway, okay, so Anne, you said you're a little behind on the book, not to call you out, but you're being called.
Yeah, I'm still, I think, in the like where you were last time. Okay. But I've been listening to the recordings, and then as I'm listening to the recordings, I'm like, oh, I have these like thoughts or questions, so it's been really good. I thought, well, maybe even if I haven't read, maybe I'll have questions based on the discussion from people that do, who I have read.
Hey, Barley, thank you. Barley's thinking about the litter box. Yeah, and then, okay, so Maddie and Alice, where are you guys at in the book right now?
Sorry, I'm working on my video still. I'm done with it, but I've gone through and I didn't actually just read it. I did some of it up until like probably chapter 5. So, but I finished it like 6 weeks ago, so I don't have a really great recollection.
Okay.
I have some notes in the margins.
You're doing the opposite approach of me. I've been reading it like 2 hours before every week, because every single month I get to like 2 hours before book club, and I'm like, shit.
Yeah, I just know that I don't have the I would just be like, oh shit, it's time to log on, and I didn't read. So
Yeah, well, I lost the book this month and was like, well, how am I going to run without having read it? But I found it. Alice, where are you at?
Yeah, so I did, I think I went through chapter 7 and I worked the steps with both of my dogs and it worked really well, but I haven't really read the rest of it. So I was too busy to read the end of it. So you can tell me what's at the end of it, Kayla.
Yeah, I mean, the chapter 7 was pretty meaty, and then chapter 8 was not a whole lot in the conclusion. Sonia, where are you at in the book right now? And welcome.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the unmute. You know what? I have not reviewed it before, in whatever, like 4 months, 5 months, but I did read it previously. So I just wanted to jump on and listen as a refresher.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, we'll go through chapter 7 and then as I said, so Sonia, just so you'll get filled in at the end of this call, we're going to talk about what books we want to put on consideration for the next book club. Then we will put that up to a vote online. But I think what we'll do then is starting September 1st, 1st through 15th, everyone who owns this book, we're all gonna go through it together and actually try to do the like 15-day thing. So that'll give us, and then in October, we'll actually start our next book.
Great.
So, all right. So,
yeah, but keep in mind how many hours a day he's training for the 15-day thing. So it's going to take longer than 15 days for most people.
Yeah, I think what we'll try to do is basically we'll start September 1st with the goal of it being 15 days, and then we'll schedule our final check call kind of at the end of September. So people should be close to the end. But yeah, I mean, I used to do Karen Overall's relaxation protocol with clients all the time, and that's the same thing. It's like supposed to be 15 days or 15 sessions, and it usually ends up being like a month. Oh, I was eating honey roasted peanuts beforehand. I feel like peanuts always end up like breaking up and getting caught in your throat and trying to kill you. Okay, so the first thing that I have kind of set down as a reminder right away on page 81, so the first page of chapter 7, was basically that so that second to last paragraph I thought was a really good reminder. So the last sentence of that paragraph says, now we are starting to introduce the concept that rewardable behavior can only be triggered by the scent of a target odor. And I really liked how this is kind of laid out as a reminder that this is just like putting any other behavior on cue. So basically for chapters 1 through 6, we were teaching the dogs how to do the behavior that we wanted. So how to actually perform that alert. And now we're installing the cue, but rather than the cue being a word, the cue is the presence of that target odor. And when I was reading that, I was kind of sitting there thinking, gosh, this is really obvious. Have I heard anyone explain it this way? And I don't think I have, or at least not cleanly like that. So kudos to Paul Bunker for once again putting down something in words that it's, oh, I feel like I knew that, but I don't think I've ever quite seen it explained that concisely, at least not in one place. So then kind of going through, he gives a lot of good reminders about displacement behaviors and what to do if the dog does make false alerts. So he is kind of on the same train as me at this point, where if the dog is alerting to an incorrect container, you're just going to wait them out. But if the dog is doing this consistently or starting to show displacement behaviors, you're going to stop the session and reassess. He doesn't go into this, but I would add that potentially if you're running into that consistently, then you can also, go back a step, so just have the target odor out, but then you could also potentially have the target odor out in the center of the room and the off target, corner or kind of occluded or raised a little bit or something to make it a little bit less salient to the dog, and then gradually reduce that. So if your dog is really struggling when your two targets are right next, or your two containers are right next to each other, just making that off target one a little bit less salient through placement, it can be an option as well. So I don't think he mentioned doing that. And, I usually at this stage, that's not necessary, but once you start getting into really the nitty gritty of discrimination, it might become important. So kind of way at the end of this book. So again, and I like this as well about Paul. He starts almost immediately introducing some basic interference. So you're not just doing blank and target within just a couple repetitions. You're also introducing things like paper, cardboard, cotton, gauze, clean gloves, metal washers. And I love that he's putting in those washers because we did just use a washer or a lid to actually teach the alert. So now the dog is learning that sniffing that does not equal reward, which was something that I think it was Natasha in the Facebook group was struggling with a little bit. And it's a common concern that people have if you're using like a coin or a bottle cap or something like that to get those price alert behaviors. People are understandably concerned that it's going to show up again later on. We hear the same thing with Kong all the time. So I love that he's kind of immediately layering that in just to ensure that that doesn't happen. So far, I've never seen it happen anyway, but it's nice to do your due diligence. And then he starts layering in those next to interference. So, the hot dogs, the kibbles, bits of tennis ball, coffee, gloves that have been handled by you. That one I would expect to be potentially the hardest, not necessarily the most tempting. I think a lot of dogs are going to get hung up on that hot dog, but I know my dogs would actually be more likely to get hung up on the disposable gloves at this stage in their training, which probably is a hint about what I should be doing more of in my training as well. And then I love his point here later on where, on the bottom of page 83, he says, shouldn't the dog be searching? And this is just a really nice reminder that, he's acknowledging, yes, 90% of your training should be focused on searching. And because 90% of your dog's career is searching, not finding. However, reread the title of this book. This book is not focused on that. He does say there's going to be a follow-on title that is more focused on actually teaching search strategy and handling and those sorts of things, which I hope is going to become a reality. I mean, he's so busy, I don't know when he's got time to write a book. But I like that reminder as well, that like, of course, this is just the start. This is just one component. We all know that, but that's not the point of this book. Did anyone else?
I don't do nearly enough blank searches. Like, and I can't even do any blind searches either because I'm never around someone who can set things out. So I think we're really challenged in that department.
Yeah, I really need to do more blanks. Although I am proud of myself today. I called Niffler off of a search that was not meant to be a blank. And I called it a blank and I rewarded him and we went home. And I was very proud of myself for that rather than we're handling the shit out of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So
nice. Good for you.
Yeah. I keep thinking that I should make myself like a dice with like rules of like what each number would correspond to as far as like a game or an exercise or something like that. And make like two of the sides a blank search and just make that how I set up my training each day. And then I guess as the dogs are focusing on different things, I could reassign what each number meant. So yeah. But again, hypothetically, now we're in the imprinting phase, so we're not doing blanks in the imprinting phase.
Right.
Does anyone have anything else that stood out to them in those first couple pages before we move on to the three-legged stool?
Well, I don't know. What do you guys do in the case of your dogs being distracted by those high-level things? Like, obviously, we want to start off low-level, kibble, not a hot dog, and not a ball. But like, what if your dog just blows you off?
Well, yeah. So with those ones, and I actually don't think he got into this quite the way that we'd like, but make sure that those are not accessible to the dog so that they can't actually just scarf up that kibble. That's the sort of thing that, depending on your dog, could also be kind of challenging to set up so that they're not knocking things over or like taking stuff out. I suspect that what I would end up needing to do is actually call the dog off. And if I'm not going to be able to call the dog off because of where their training is at, I would probably have them on a line.
Yeah.
Right. And then reassess. And
there's just so many things in there that could just build like determination.
Yeah.
you know, because like you're or make the search less desirable or something like that. I just feel like it's such a delicate thing.
Yeah. Has anyone actually have you run into that? Has anyone else here run into that sort of problem yet? So far what I have seen is if you're actually setting up your searches simple enough and you've got enough in the target odor kind of bank, so far I've seen most dogs, if not all dogs, kind of they do try to alert, they might try to get at that target odor, but if you re-queue the search, I have so far always seen dogs kind of able to disengage and go on to their target odor. But this is probably where, yeah, you might want to start out with like a tiny piece of the ball or a tiny bit of kibble and put that higher up, further away, and kind of layer it back in if you're running into something that's particularly challenging for the dog. But if they, like, hypothetically, if they're getting their jackpot for the find, then ignoring a component of the jackpot should be okay. And that's what I've always seen with my dogs. You know, there's always a dog that's going to prove me wrong, though.
Right.
Yeah, I think like for this it seemed like, and again I'm just skimming this as we're talking. The previous one with the alert behavior was like kind of accessible with the lid, and then here he's talking about having things in containers that aren't accessible, so it seems a little bit of a jump to me. But I have had classes where, and this is like kind of your like essential oil nose work classes, where our instructor has asked us to bring in, like, each person bring in a few treats and random things from home, and they are in inaccessible containers. And for the most part, all the dogs really, like, they may show a little bit more interest in some things, or like some really delectable treats that people have brought in. But for the most part, the dogs really do alert on the odor. But I think maybe like it's the time frame, like the dogs I'm talking about have had a long reinforcement history for the odor before introducing like some extra, like a hot dog, you know, like, so I'm wondering about maybe that's the reason. I mean, one, it's inaccessible, but then two, they just have that, like you said, they have that reinforcement history. So they may get distracted for a little bit, but then they do go to the odor. But it seemed like a jump to me to go to containers from the lid. But I'm kind of just processing that now as we're talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So
it's going to be interesting when we actually start going through and like doing the setups, because I keep finding myself struggling a little bit to like read the protocols and make sure that the protocols make sense to me, kind of until I actually sit down and start setting them up. So it'll be interesting to revisit this.
It is also interesting, like, if this is something you do in 15 days with your dog and you're proofing the search with these high level distractions and stuff, you need to have some sort of background history with the dog. Like, you need to have, this can't be the first odor that you're imprinting on them, I think, if you're going to start leveling in distractions like this in this period of time. Like, what day are you at this point? This is like day 7. And I mean, I just
11.
Okay, so like a dog that's never like done a search before, start from the finish, start from the very beginning. This is their first odor of like non-primary reinforcer that they're looking for. And then we start leveling in distractions at day 11. Like, that seems kind of wild to me. I feel like that maybe day 11 for a dog that you're imprinting a new odor on is like totally fine. But if this is the dog that has never really searched before, that seems fast to me.
Oh, you know, and actually I misspoke. It actually looks like the distractors are coming in on 15. So that's the last.
Okay.
Yeah. So on training plan lesson 15 is when the low level interference come in.
Oh, yeah. Low level at 15. Right.
Yeah. And then 16 is where they're they're coming in with a high level interference. And I guess I will say as well, just in defense of Paul, because of how he's got these, the number of treats per click and these progress checks.
Right.
If you're actually going through this and actually doing the number of repetitions he suggests and actually doing that progress check,
right.
I bet it works.
Yeah, I mean, with a good handler, I think so. But like, if you have a dog that's new and a handler that's new, like day 15, this still seems pretty quickly to start throwing in hot dogs, especially if you don't have like an obedience history with the dog.
I don't know. I mean, with Niffler, I think day 2 or 3 that I had him on bats, I had one with bats and one with the same treat that I was rewarding him with.
Really?
Yeah, as like a 5-6 month old puppy.
Oh.
And
cool.
He was consistently, I think part of it too is what I've really noticed is if you've got the 2 containers really close, that actually helps in this stage. Where you kind of, I think sometimes people want to like put them further away, which it was something I did suggest for like a slightly different reason, but this is just where so much nuance comes in, because I think, he might show interest in the treats, but then if that bat is like right there, it's really easy to get the switch over and then mark for that.
Mm-hmm.
It also is a little easier to get unclear stuff. So like you have to be really careful with that. But yeah, I mean, I did something not dissimilar with Niffler. I didn't use anything that is higher value than what I was rewarding him with. I wasn't throwing hot rotisserie chicken in one and then rewarding him with, I think I was using like Zooks or Ziwi Peak or something. But I did have Zooks in a container and then was rewarding with Zooks for ignoring the Zooks.
Right.
So yeah,
cool. Well, that's great.
Actually,
that's cool.
It. Who has issues and why and at what stage. But yeah, I mean, we're also not gonna, I don't think we're gonna actually have any dogs in our group that are 100% novice. So I don't we're not necessarily going to be able to say how this works for a dog that's never done any searching or any imprinting before, because like I know like my dogs.
I might be able to. That would be fun. I would take a break from training my dog to do this from start to finish with a dog that has no history with it.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like I can go back and look through Niffler's videos, and I was not following this book, but at least for the distractors and interference, I did introduce those really early on with Niffler.
Cool.
And the biggest problem I saw from him at that stage wasn't so much temptation from the interference. It was more just kind of confusion, because we'd done so much alert training. He was just like he was really unclear on like why the alert wasn't being rewarded. It wasn't so much that he really wanted the target odor. It was more just that he was like, well, I alerted, so do you want me to alert harder? Do you want me to wait longer? Like, yeah, slightly different type of confusion, I guess. Okay, so then we get into that 3-legged stool principle, which is discrimination, trace detection, and generalization. So the first step is starting to layer in some of those other things that are going to be present in the target environment, so that the dog learns that even if they're sniffing bat plus soil, or all sorts of things, bat plus soil is a fine example, that the dog is learning that a target is a target no matter how it is presented or encountered. It's something he doesn't actually get into in the training plans here, but it's something he talked about on our podcast, our latest one for the discrimination series, is that, you're teaching the dog soil and grass without bats don't get rewarded, but bats with soil and grass do get rewarded, plus bats without soil and grass, so that the dog is learning that like A, yes, B, no, but A, B, yes, and A, C, yes, and A, D, yes, but like it has to have A. So I think, that's a good thing to be remembering. And I love the way that he described doing that in training in the podcast. That's something I've never done before, and I would really like to try at some point. I'm such a lazy trainer and it just doesn't seem to have ever been relevant as far as carnivore scats, but like at some point maybe we'll have someone ask us to do something that's a little bit trickier. But yeah, so far it just has not been necessary with carnivore scats. And then next up, he reminds us that we need to calibrate the dog's nose to both trace amounts and larger amounts. And, again, he's talked about this on the podcast before, and I think so will have a couple others. If you're always training with exactly 25 grams of TNT, you might have a dog that ignores larger or smaller amounts, because volume can change how things are presenting. And, it's kind of like what we've talked about with Niffler as well, where if they're always working on that same large target odor, they might develop some search strategies that don't actually serve them in the long run. And then we've got generalization. So I just highlighted here, the expert nose is when we calibrate the dog so precisely that it can distinguish between the trained target odor and all other variations of the same odor. And again, that's something that we might want in some cases if we want the dogs to just find the odor of female black bears that are lactating, so that we can get a population census on number of female black bears. Or I know I was talking to a scientist at some point about they wanted a count. What was it? It was, I can't remember whether they wanted pregnancy or lactation, because they were having a really hard time. It's easy to figure out recruitment rates. At what point do the young make it far enough along that they actually are showing up on camera traps or those sorts of things. But they were wondering if the dogs could help find scat samples that then would let us know, what number of black bear cubs are never making it out of the den in the spring, or something like that. And in that case, they didn't necessarily want the dogs to just be finding the scent of a lactating female black bear. That was something they were going to do post analysis. But it's something that we could run into where we actually want the dogs to be that precise, but we might not want that. In most cases, we would rather not have the dogs only finding lactating females or dominant males, or, whatever it is that's hyper specific. So I like that he brings that in. And that example of the Yugoslav TNT versus American TNT is a really classic example. And then he reminds us once again that preparation and clear communication are key, and in most cases will take more time than the actual imprinting. It was funny when I was reading that today. I was sitting out in a hammock in my backyard and practicing, just reading this and preparing myself to go and do these training samples. And Niffler came and shoved a toy in my lap and was like, "No, let's work now." Niffler, you didn't read the book. It says we have to plan and prepare. So anything that you guys picked up on the three-legged stool principle? Right, and then we get into the training plans for 11 through 14, or maybe 11 through 15. Again, what I personally find in these sections is that I kind of skim through it and double check it, but I have a really hard time reading these in detail and having any notes on them. So if anyone's got anything that they want to say on these next couple training plans. Otherwise, it is more or less a stepwise version of what we just explained and how to actually do what we were just going through.
No, I really like this. It's all stuff that we really, really need to work on, and makes you can do all this surface level work and overview work, and then you can really start to pick things apart and really tease things in the direction that you want them to go. And this is really important, I think, to kind of make things more understood by the dog so that you have a more complete picture. And then I put it in the notes here. Can you recalibrate a dog from general to specific and back? As they generalize for certain things. And I think we've already talked about that before, but that was what I had in my notes.
That's one of those things that I feel yes, but kind of within a degree of what that dog temperamentally was predisposed to.
Right.
I have never, I have kind of done it with Barley, but most recently, and I know I've talked about this in the past, but with this most recent multi-carnivore project in California, it was just, I just decided that given his age and stage in his career, that it was easier for everyone to just kind of stop fighting that discrimination battle and let him be a generalist. And again, the researchers actually wanted coyote scat anyway. It would be interesting for me to actually try to see how specific I can get him and whether or not I can get him to maintain that, because I've never really tried, and especially now that I've kind of let him go pretty general. It would be interesting to see how hard it is to swing that pendulum back away again from his natural tendency.
Right. I think I'm finding that Bruce is not very generalist, and you don't know that until you start introducing more odors, of course. And so we had just done so much on one odor.
Yeah.
And so like making that jump from one black bear to another, I mean, I don't even know. One could have been a female, one could have been a male, one could have been lactating, one blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So
what I will say as well is it seems like most dogs get better at those initial generalizations the more target odors they learn.
Yeah,
and usually it takes somewhere in that 3 to 5 example range for them to then feel ready to start making that jump to the 6th or the 7th.
Right.
Like the jump from 1 to 2 is a lot harder than the jump from 5 to 6.
Right. Yeah.
But
yeah, we should go out and find more scats.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really excited to get Niffler out on this next project and see, like, in about a year of training and maturity, like what he looks like on the next project, and how specific is he kind of overly specific or not, because he wasn't necessarily overly specific on the wind farms, but we had some problems with him being a little bit overly specific and hesitant in Guatemala, and I haven't gotten him out again since then. So, and I think there's just all sorts of like potential explanations there.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, as you're introducing dogs to new odors, you definitely don't want to try to like make them you don't want to try to make this expert nose of like only this one thing. You want to like lean towards being a generalist as you're training up a dog on their new on odors that they haven't had a variety of at first.
I think it would depend a little bit on your study goals. So that's something like we ask when we're in initial calls with potential clients is, what is the consequences if what are the consequences if our dogs make a false alert, and what are the consequences if they make a miss, and kind of which would you prefer, so that we can get a gauge on like where we want to try to push the dogs, or because we do have 5 dogs available, which dogs might be a better fit for a given project. We haven't actually had a project where all 5 dogs are available and we actually could really pick which dog is the best fit for a project, but it's something that hypothetically we would want to do.
Yeah, I guess I was speaking more like generally of like as you're training a dog to understand that there's different variations of the same odor, and like generally speaking at this time we like want them to find all black bear, and we're not going to worry about distinguishing between black bear and grizzly before they've had enough exposure to enough individuals of black bear where they have this understanding that like everything that smells like this is within that pot of things. And then like once they have that understanding, then we can start to do some discrimination between things. Like we wouldn't want to try to do discrimination before they have that baseline understanding.
Probably. I do think you would want to ensure that they understand their target odor before you start layering in discrimination. And that was the story that I crossed my mind and then I decided not to say, but now it's more relevant, so I'm going to bring it back up. When we were in Guatemala on Niffler's 2nd day of searching, he alerted to an area where either a puma or a jaguar had urine marked and then scratched, and they leave these like huge like piles of grass and vegetation and stuff kind of piled up, so it's actually visible and you can see like, oh yeah, cat was there, and he alerted to it, and I told him no, search on. And I think that was like one of those little choice points where I had like 5 seconds to make a decision, and I made potentially the wrong one for him, because he was trying to jump from like these dehydrated year-old samples to fresh, and he showed an understanding of the target odor that was a little bit overly general. And when I told him no on that, I can't say for sure, but I think that was probably a big part of him falling apart and then being like, well, I don't know what it is at all then, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that freshness and age is definitely a huge part of the picture that we were struggling with in Guatemala. And yeah, in retrospect, I wish I could go back and reward him for that one and see how different the rest of our week would have been. Because I suspect he still was going to struggle. I don't think that was like the one mistake I made that broke him. I don't think it was that impactful, but I do keep looking back on like that search, because it actually happened 2 or 3 times throughout that search. And particularly, it kills me a little bit because it actually is something that is confirmable and visible. So it isn't even the end of the world if he had just continued alerting to these scratching areas for the rest of his career. And I think it probably would have been less.
Those split-second decisions are so hard. Those are the ones that really, like, you're like, oh man.
Yeah. And especially when that happened like on deployment, and you know, we only had 2 weeks that we were in Guatemala. So as soon as it was like, ah shit, we're back to the training board and like 10 steps backwards in Niffler's training, like I actually don't have time to fix that because we're being paid to get out here and search. So that's one that keeps you up at night. Thank God, Barley.
He'll recover.
He's so good right now, guys. He's so much better.
That's awesome.
I think 3 is gonna be his year. I was really hoping 2 was gonna be it, but I think 3 is gonna be it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have anything that they want to chime in on? We're kind of up through 91 right now. Hi, Niffler, we're talking about you. You want to come say hi? Come on up. There he is. Oh my goodness, there he is. Okay, that's good. Okay. Yeah, you're very good. Thank you. All right, so then let's see. So yeah, we're talking about, okay, if they're off, that's enough. Off.
Yeah, the rest are like training plans.
Yeah, the rest is training plans. Niffler, off. Thank you. I love you very much. So yeah, some initial proofing, some initial distractions. Then we bring in those low-level interference on lesson 15. So that's page 95. And then the high-level interference on 16. And then yeah, we're done. And then we get into chapter 8 is just a reminder about record keeping and a suggestion for checking out logs for dogs. Has anyone actually tried logs for dogs yet? I feel like I should.
No, I've been doing hard copy stuff because I think it gets me to do it more than if it was on my phone.
I think I'm gonna try doing a written record as well and see if I think that's gonna work better for me.
I have some templates if you would like that are already like spaced out and everything for this like specific note paper that I bought, so I can send you some links to that stuff.
Yeah, that would be great. I also teaser that will be publicly available very soon. Conservation Dogs Collective is releasing a record keeping book.
Oh, cool.
Has space for like permit numbers and like all sorts of other stuff that's like conservation specific. So I'm definitely going to be buying one of those.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah, I would love to see logs that people are using.
It's a constant issue. There's so many different apps that have been tried and like different formats, and I think the problem is it's just too fluid. But yeah, maybe one of these days I should make it a priority of me for the podcast or for the group to just actually try all of them, like do a week trying all of the different ones out there and see if I actually find any that I really like. All right, and then we get on to our conclusion. So he just reminds us to reminds us again about the importance of reward selection and hierarchy of rewards. Yeah, that's really pretty much it. And then there's references at the end. And then again, promises us that he's going to be releasing a workbook to cover the aspects of directional and working control to conduct searches. So hopefully we get to see that soon. I haven't heard him talk about that before until I got to here, but yeah, hopefully that comes out soon, and then we can add that to our book list.
So, cool.
Yeah. Oh, all right. We got 10 minutes before the next call. As I said, so for September, we're just going to all work through this book as everyone puts in their orders for our next book. I am going to put out a poll for what our next book should be. Does anyone have any suggestions, anything that they have been eyeing that we should be considering for our new book starting in October?
Well, I missed the Scent Movement book.
Mm-hmm.
And I did purchase it, but I haven't read it. Yeah, but I don't think there's probably not enough new people to do that one again yet. So
yeah, maybe that should be our next one though. That would be a good one to kind of revisit every couple years. We did that one while I was in Kenya, so that would have been April of 2021. Is that right? No, 2022. I don't know when I was in Kenya.
It was definitely before my time, so it sounds great.
Okay. Yeah, we can put that one on there and see, you know, because we're still going to put it up to a vote. Osterkamp. The other book that I have right now, that looks like it's going to be a little bit, well, okay, so I've got two that one that I've already read and one that I haven't. So one is using detector dogs to monitor aquatic ecosystems. It looks like it's going to be a really scary textbook, and then it's actually a very fast read. I know Chris Hoffman said she was interested in that. Would anyone else like to put a vote for that one to be on the list? And
what's it called?
Using detection dogs to monitor aquatic ecosystems. It's by Nia Richards.
Yeah, I'd be interested in reading that one.
Cool. Let's see. I'm just looking over at my bookshelf. I've also got a biography of Richard Henry that has proven to be exceptionally boring. Nobody wants to read that one. I was so excited about it. He's the guy who, like, in 1890 was the first guy to use conservation dogs for kiwi and kakapo.
cool.
I guess the book is so boring. It like chapters and chapters about like the voyage from Ireland to Australia as his family like immigrated to Australia, and then like about famines in Australia, and then like how the family eventually ended up in New Zealand. And it's just like, all right, you guys are like really, really deep in your historian brains right now, and this is not what I was here for. Which is fine. It's clearly not written for me. All right, any other books that people want to suggest? Otherwise, I'll put the call out on social media, and we'll see what other people come up with. So we've done Canine Ergonomics. There is that really big Canines, the Original Biosensor book. I think Nathan Hall and Mallory Deschamps were involved in that one. I'll put that one down.
Cool.
Yeah, that one's been on my list. I think that one's like another textbook though, so it might be another $100 book, which is kind of the problem we keep running into. It's like, well, where do we want on the axis of like useful and dense and expensive to like fun and interesting? Yeah, because the useful is good, dense and expensive not good.
Right.
Yeah. The dense books are just, I mean, I don't know. I feel like for anything I want density of, as far as content, I'll read a journal article because it's not going to be as long. It's going to be like 20 pages max. So like that's going to pack a lot of information, but it's not going to be super long.
Yeah.
And then if I'm going to read a book on like the theory of any of this kind of stuff, like I'd rather have it to be like lighter. I'd rather consume the dense information in short spurts, I guess is a good way to.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people that want to invest in textbooks at the prices, but because they're so overpriced.
They're so overpriced. Yeah. But yeah, and then we can also see, I know there's a couple other books that would also just be kind of fun to read. There's What the Dog Knows, which is a kind of a memoir of a human remains detection handler.
I was going to mention that one, but then I thought, well, I shouldn't mention it because of, this being more conservation. But I've heard it's such a good book, and it's so similar in a lot of.
It's a really good book. I read it a couple of years ago, and it's a nice, fast read. It's more of a memoir. There are definitely parts of it that I think are really relevant and interesting. And then, like any book, there's always parts of it where they're like describing their training process, and you're like, you what now? Like there's not nearly enough detail or whatever, because again, it's kind of a memoir.
I'd like to put that one on the list if there's room.
Yeah, I feel like I want at least like 3 to 5 options. I don't want 15 options, but we'll see. We can see if anyone else is suggesting any other books, and then again, we'll have this book be our October book, so we've got time for everyone to make their votes, and then make their orders.
Cool.
All right, well, let's wrap this up with a couple of minutes before our next call. So it's going to be at that same link, but everyone get up and stretch your legs a little bit before that next one. So see you in a minute.